about ministry, talking about you as ministers. First, we're going to talk about some things that you need. Things you need in order to be a minister, in order to do ministry. And then we'll talk about things that do not disqualify you from ministry, as much as you might wish they did. Things that do not disqualify you from being a minister of the gospel. First, looking at Jesus' calling of Matthew. It says, while Jesus was having dinner at Matthew's house, many tax collectors, like Matthew, and sinners, who do you think is included in that term, came and ate with him and his disciples. When the Pharisees saw this, they asked his disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" The answer is, because that's the only kind of people they are. Now, for a Pharisee like that, a religious person like that Pharisee, they're interested in religion, interested in religiosity, interested in sacrifice. Look at how much I've sacrificed, but they're not interested in mercy. They're not interested in forgiveness and providing what people need. So they're not interested in a Savior, they're not interested in Christianity, they're not interested in gospel ministry. And they say, Jesus, why would you spend time and talk with gross, disgusting sinners who are in need? Why would you bother? Why would you care about them? I mean, what do they have to offer you? And Jesus, with complete patience, right, doesn't just go up the handle. He says, "It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick." If you think you're righteous, then I have nothing to say to you. Then I have nothing to offer you unless you are asking for forgiveness. And if y'all think you're perfect, then you don't need a Savior and Jesus doesn't need to be here. And if that would ever be something we would consider thinking, let's remember some more of Jesus' words. Jesus is the one who said, "There is no one who is good. There is no one good except God." And yet, with this audience, in this instance, Jesus still knows that's true, but that's not the first thing he says. With this audience, Jesus is willing to say something like, "The healthy don't need a doctor." Jesus knows that these Pharisees think that they don't need a Savior, because they think that they're pretty good people. But no one is good except God. And yet that's not the first thing Jesus says here to them. Because he wants to be able to talk to them. He wants to be able to show them mercy. He wants to be able to talk about forgiveness so they can recognize and appreciate their Savior. And if the first thing Jesus had said was, "Each of you is just as disgusting as every prostitute I just had dinner with at the tax collector's house," well, then the Pharisees are done listening. He doesn't want to turn them away. He wants to relate with them. He wants to carry out ministry with them. Now, religion, unlike ministry, religion divides the world into good people and bad people. If it's not a goal of religion, I think we have to admit that at least is a result of religion. You see it in the religious mindset of people who say, "Yeah, nobody's perfect, but I do little sins. I don't do big sins like bad people." And what constitutes as a big sin is going to be dependent on whether you are a conservative religious or a liberal religious, but that's totally a separate sermon series of its own. I'm a Christian. I'm not religious. I don't try to divide good people from bad people because I believe that we are all bad people. And I believe that every sin is a big sin, that every sin is that bad, that every sin is enough for the God of justice to say, because of that, because you have that, blood must be shed, life must be sacrificed. And we don't really like that. We don't really like to think about that. What we like, what we want to believe, is that we are good. Because if I'm good, then maybe somebody, maybe even God, owes me something. But that's not true. Jesus says, if that's what you think, then I don't have anything to say to you. If you think I owe you something, I don't have anything to say to you unless you recognize that on your own, you morally have the same standing before God as every murderer and rapist. You lack perfect love. That much is black and white. Morally, the same standing before God. And that's the first thing you need in order to be minister. The first thing you need to be a minister of the gospel is to recognize your moral failure. Recognize your own moral failure, or you will always think that gospel ministry is just ridiculous and pointless, and you will certainly never have any zeal to be a part of it. And then let that recognition of moral failure humble you, appropriately humble you. Christianity and gospel ministry, unlike religion, seeks to share a message with bad people that you don't have to be a good person because Jesus already did that for us. And that even though you don't have to be a good person, trusting Jesus makes you want to be a good person. And trusting Jesus makes you look good to God. And He has promised that in eternity you will be a perfect person. Look at Jesus' ministry. He eats with sinners. Jesus only eats with sinners, no matter what you've done, no matter who you are. The distinction that Jesus recognizes is not between good and bad. The only distinction that divides humanity now is between the proud and the humble. If you think, Jesus, you owe me, He says, then I have not come for you. But when you recognize and admit, Jesus, I am in moral failure, and you do not owe me anything, at that moment, He comes in, eats with you, and He heals you. Recognizing moral failure, humility. First two things you need. And then in humility, to recognize yourself, not as anyone who's above anyone else, but rather someone who is in a position to serve everyone else. And then you recognize you have the gospel. You apply the gospel to your moral failure. You apply the gospel to your humility so that it's not depression, it's humility. Your moral failure is forgiven. You recognize that you have the gospel. You recognize that you have the one thing that all people need. And if you recognize in humility your position to serve everyone, well, then you're going to want to use this one thing that they all need, to serve everyone, and that's compassion. Recognize moral failure, humility, compassion, and apply the gospel to them all. Applying the gospel to moral failure will be forgiveness. Applying the gospel to humility will mean that you're not depressed, that you're rejoicing. God, who am I that you would love me and do this for me? And applying the gospel to compassion means I have to do something, I'm compassionate. Well, you have the gospel. That's what you're going to use. That's what you're going to do. Those are the three things you need. And apply the gospel to them all. Jesus had been doing ministry for a couple of years, and so he covered a lot of territory, and he had met a lot of people and seen a lot of problems. And as Jesus went through the towns and villages, seeing all the people and all the crowds, seeing that they were people whose religion and whose behavior was not what he wanted it to be, he had compassion on them. He sees a society full of sinners. And for Jesus, he is better than they are. You're not, but he is. And yet he sees a society full of sinners, and he has compassion on them. He doesn't feel anger. He doesn't feel betrayal or disgust. He doesn't even feel frustrated. He feels compassion. As he looked at the needs of every town and village around him and the people within them, he had compassion. Now, compassion is more than sympathy. You can't help but do something when you're compassionate. And what did Jesus do? What did he think that the people need? What did he tell his followers to do? What did he tell his followers to provide? Better government? Fewer regulation? Better quality of life? No, Jesus said that what these hurting people need and what his followers can provide is gospel ministry. He said the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Let's get out into our harvest field, recognizing moral failure with humility, compassion, and the gospel. As we go out, as we represent our Savior, realize that as a Christian, anyone who knows you to be a Christian, then to that person you represent Christ. they associate you with Christ if they know you to be Christian. So we represent our Savior. As we go out there and as we represent our Savior, let's not forget our Savior. Might sound silly, but it happened. And there's a whole lot of religion going on out there, and it leaves people harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. Now, the Jews and religious people of Jesus' day knew a law-based religion, a performance-driven, this is what you have to do and this is what you have to be in order for God to love you and in order for God to bless you. That's what they knew. And that's what a lot of people in this world know too. But that's not your Savior. That's not what they need you to represent. So as we go out and represent our Savior, don't forget your Savior. Your Savior went through the towns and villages teaching and proclaiming the gospel. That's what's needed. The good news. The kingdom of heaven is near. Performance-based religions will leave you crushed because you haven't been the perfect husband, because you haven't been the perfect church member, because you haven't been the perfect neighbor. Or performance-based religion will leave you self-righteous if it does lead you to think that you have been a pretty good person. Neither is good. Religion leaves people like sheep without a shepherd, but gospel ministry shows you who your shepherd is. And that's ministry that you can't have too much of, and that you can't have too many people doing. Jesus said the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. And when he said that 2,000 years ago, there were about 300 million people in the world. There's 7.5 billion today, more than 25 times more. If the harvest was plentiful then, what is it now? It's a desperate situation. So Jesus said, pray. Ask the Lord to send out workers into the harvest field. Pray that churches would teach God's word in truth and purity instead of just letting go of it. Pray that God would bless the efforts of our synod as we start 10, 12, 15 new missions every year. Pray that God would bless the efforts of our congregation as we plan to reach out with the gospel in Swamico and to spin off another church in Hobart. Pray that God would lead the hearts of young men and women to consider full-time public ministry as a pastor or as a teacher. Pray that the gospel would motivate you to transfigure your neighborhood so that the people you wave to as you pass them each day, that you might enjoy their company in heaven. Pray for these things. The disciples did. They saw everything that Jesus saw. They saw the people, how many people were in need of ministry, how many people were in need of their Savior. And so Jesus said, pray about it, guys. And they did. Pray that God will send more workers out in the harvest field. And so they did. They prayed about it. And then Jesus said, guys, good news. Your prayers have been answered. Here's my authority. Go. You too. Recognizing moral failure with humility and compassion and the gospel is your authority. Go. Pastor, you already said it. I'm a moral failure. I'm not a moral enough person. I can't talk about Jesus. I just feel like a hypocrite. Are you kidding? Do you see this list of men Jesus calls? Moses the murderer, Paul the Christian persecutor, Matthew the tax cheat, Peter the arrogant, impulsive denier, Simon the zealot, which is Simon the terrorist, zealous enough for his beliefs that he would be willing to kill anybody who gets in the way or disagrees with him religiously. That's who he had been. Simon the terrorist. Judas, the suicidal betrayer. And those are just the ones whose sinful lifestyles have been shared with us in the Bible. All of them are moral failures. If you need proof that you don't need to be a moral enough person in order to be a minister, I give you me. And I don't want to give the impression that in any way I'm saying that my sins are good, because they're not. But my immoral imperfections do not disqualify me from ministry. In fact, it can benefit my ministry, because my sin allows me to relate with people with every single person, sin and need for a Savior is something that we have in common. My sinful mistakes don't make it more difficult to do ministry. It makes it easier because it makes my self-righteousness get out of the way. And that's true for an individual. It's also true for a congregation, that ministry, gospel ministry, will be easier when the self-righteousness gets out of the way. And so I can say to every sinner in the world as an equal, humbly and honestly say that my life would be a total train wreck if it weren't for the intervention of Christ. I can say that. And I think you can too. Sure. But it's not immorality for me. My hang-up, my hurdle isn't immorality for me. It's just that I don't think that I know enough to tell people about Jesus. And again, please. Most of these men had not achieved the equivalence of an elementary education. And they had only known about Jesus for 2 years. And his death and resurrection was something that they didn't even know about him yet, and yet Jesus sends them out into the world to be gospel missionaries. If they knew enough, then so do you. You know what sin is, you know what grace is. If you cannot speak like angels, if you cannot preach like Paul, so what? You can. Tell the love of Jesus. You can say he died for all. Immorality doesn't disqualify you. Lack of knowledge doesn't disqualify you. And if you feel like it does, then get your nose in your Bible. Get reading, get learning. But maybe you're thinking, those aren't the things that I feel disqualify me. Another thing that doesn't disqualify you from ministry is supporting a ministry. All right? So supporting a ministry doesn't disqualify you from being a minister. So maybe you're pastor, I give offerings and support our ministry so that you can do this on our behalf. And that would be a perfectly logical expectation if the harvest was small. And if Swamico's 1,000 people, I got this. And I promise, I will make sure to talk to every one of those 1,000 every year. But the reality is that you guys brush shoulders with people I will never meet. And maybe that's what you feel disqualified. That there's so many people. Too many. Can't do it. Can't do it. There's just too many people. I don't know where to start. Well, then we need to listen to Jesus. He said, you don't have to go to the Gentiles or travel to foreign towns of the Samaritans. Just go to the lost sheep of Israel. Now, when Jesus says that, he isn't expressing any kind of racial bias against Gentiles, or Samaritans. I think Jesus makes that pretty clear in his ministry. As he goes to the Gentiles and as he goes into the towns of the Samaritans, that he wants all people to know the gospel. But he's not saying here, here's what I'm going to do. He's saying, here's what you can do. And what Jesus is saying to his disciples and to you is that as you go out there and you wanting to share the gospel with people, don't overthink it. Don't make it harder than it is. Don't forget the obvious ones. Aim for your friends. Go for your family. Go for those who know you, who respect you, who will listen to you and relate with them. As we look at these verses of Matthew today, I really think, I am convinced, I'm not just saying this because it's something I like to talk about. I really think that Jesus is saying that if you are not actively sharing your faith, that has to change. That needs to change, but that doesn't mean that you have to go to Africa, right? We talked about that 3 weeks ago on Pentecost. It also doesn't mean that you have to go to Walmart and tap a stranger on the shoulder and say, brother, do you believe in Jesus? Do you know Jesus? You just go to the lost sheep of your family. Go to your friends. Go to those you know and share your faith. Why? Why bother? Why care to engage in ministry? Why care for these people in need? Because Jesus told us to. We just have to do everything that he says. Jesus wants you to be motivated by something much deeper and more profound than that. It's the last verse. The last 6 words. Freely you have received. Freely give. If ministry to you is simply a matter of following instructions, doing it because Jesus told you so, then it will always be a burden. It will never be a joy, and your gospel will ring insincere. The only way for gospel ministry to be properly done is if it is properly motivated by the gospel. And if you think of how much you've been freely given, if it were not for the grace of God, where would I be? Who would I be? What would I be? By the grace of God, I know the gospel and I trust it, so by the grace of God, I go. By the grace of God, I was not born into a pagan family in some third world country. How about you? Do you have a family? Do you expect to eat today? Do you have a home? Do you have the hope of heaven? You don't even need to be afraid to die. Why? Because you have been freely given the grace of God. You have been freely given Christ's righteousness so that you look like a saint in God the Father's eyes. It is because of what God has given you that you have what you have and you are what you are. If you're going to be properly motivated, here's your attitude. Freely given, so freely give. Do ministry and all fruits of faith with that motivation as a response to God's grace to you. Now God pours out His grace and His provision upon the lives of all people, including those who ignore Him and those who reject Him. We are set apart as Christians because as Christians we are the ones who claim that we don't just take God for granted. Oh, if that were true. Imagine if everyone who calls themselves Christian were engaged in gospel ministry. Imagine if every Christian simply let it be known that I am one who loves God and I trust Jesus, and that's it. If we could all do just that much, and if we can accomplish that much, then imagine if everyone who calls themselves Christian, that they would recognize they are going to an eternal kingdom. Therefore, everything they have and everything they are can be used to serve the spiritual and physical needs of everyone around them. But what I really want you to imagine today is imagine if everyone who calls themselves Christian was properly motivated by the gospel. Not motivated by what you have to do or what you should do, but motivated by what Jesus has done. Appreciating the grace you've been given. So you look down on no one because you know that if it weren't for the grace of God, and you really just wanted to share what you have been freely given. God grant it, my friend. Amen.